Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
In this episode of the Global Medical Device Podcast, we cover habits of highly effective, true quality medical professionals. Now, you may be wondering what I mean by true quality, and I would encourage you to listen to this episode of the podcast to learn more.
Hello and welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast. This is your host, the founder and VP of Quality and Regulatory at Greenlight Guru, John Speer. And I'm pretty excited about this one because I'm going to give you all a twist today. I've got a usual voice on the Global Medical Device Podcast, Mike Drues with Vascular Sciences. So Mike, welcome.
Thank you, John. Always a pleasure to speak with you and your audience.
All right. So Mike, recently you and I talked about the habits of highly effective medical or regulatory professionals. And I thought today we would kind of look at this through a slightly different lens and focus on some habits of highly effective, true quality medical device professionals. And here's the twist. I thought that we would kind of have a slight role reversal today, that maybe you could answer or ask me some questions about true quality, and we can dive right into that. Is that okay with you?
I would be happy to do that, John.
All right, so I'm gonna sit back and wait for the first question. So let's just dive right into habits of highly effective, true quality medical device professionals.
Well, first of all, John, for the benefit of the audience and also for the benefit of myself, you've used the phrase true quality a couple of times. Maybe as a start, why don't you tell us what you mean by true quality?
Sure, absolutely. I think we in this industry for a long time have been, I don't know, conditioned, or maybe we've conditioned ourselves. I'm not sure the root cause initially, but let's just say that we've gotten kind of complacent and very focused on checking boxes to be able to demonstrate compliance. And I like something that you've said before, just being compliant with the regulations means that you're the equivalent of a C student. And I think if companies realize that, then, they're average, and some of the things that we believe in at Greenlight Guru is we're all in this to improve the quality of life. And that the notion that quality, I'm using air quotes here, is the responsibility of the quality department and not the responsibility of others, I think kind of misses the intent. All of us in medical device industry have a responsibility to bring true quality to the table. And, of course, it depends on the different roles that we play, but everything, whether it be engineering or manufacturing or quality management systems or regulatory submissions and so on, marketing, sales, and so on, we all have a quality role that we play into this process. So, that's kind of in a nutshell, just getting people to think about this a little bit more globally.
So to paraphrase John, would it be fair to say that true quality is not just simply meeting the regulatory or quality requirements, not just, being a C student, but going above and beyond and doing what we as professional engineers know that we should be doing?
That's a fair statement, Mike. Absolutely. I mean, I'm an overachiever. Maybe not everybody else is, but I want to know what I need to do to get a beyond an A, and just checking a box on a form to say, yep, I'm compliant. Man, that's not a good, for me, it's not a good feeling. I mean, maybe there are some out there listening who are just fine with skating by, but I want to give people tips and pointers and some habits that they can embrace that can help them be A students.
Well, John, as you and I have talked about in the past, we're both very much on the same page, and you're preaching to the choir. And perhaps as we continue through your 7 habits, you can share with us how to implement that in reality, because as you and I have talked about before, sometimes convincing companies to go above and beyond is what is required is not always an easy thing to do. So let's move on to your first of 7 habits of highly effective quality professionals, and that is your QMS should be simple and it should be right side. So what does that mean, John? Your QMS should be simple and right side.
Yeah, so it's really a good place to start, and folks, I want you to hear this. I mean, compliance with regulations is important, and it's not enough. And I think sometimes when companies start to establish their quality management system, and it doesn't really matter if you're a startup doing this for the first time or you're a well-established business that has had a quality system in place for decades. This is a thing that without careful attention and focus, a quality management system can be kind of unwieldy pretty fast. And, in my practice over the past 20 years, I've seen really kind of two extremes. I've seen the one extreme where the quality system is ad hoc and almost non-existent at times, and then the other extreme that I've seen, it typically employed by like larger companies, but not always, is a quality management system that's overly burdensome and creates a lot of minutia, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of forms and paperwork, if you will, that frankly don't add value to the process. And so my philosophy on quality management system is let's keep it as simple as we possibly can. Let's not just make a bunch of rules for the sake of them making rules. Yes, we of course want to adhere to regulations, but we need to have conscious efforts to make sure that our quality management system evolves and is right sized to fit the shape and size of company that we are. If I'm a startup, that's probably going to look quite a bit different than if I'm a company that's a multinational with a dozen different facilities and sites across the globe. But we need to be cognizant of, and we need to keep our quality management system as simple as it possibly can, because at the end of the day, the employees, the people who need to follow those processes and procedures that we're defining, they need to know what they're doing, and they need to understand the intent behind that. And so hopefully that gives you a little bit better perspective of what I mean about keeping a quality management system simple and right size.
Well, I love the idea, John, keeping it simple and right sized. And perhaps I could take it even a half a step further. I would say personalized or customized as well, because and this is a recommendation that I make to a lot of the companies that I work with. Your quality management system should not be cookie cutter. It should not be the same as every other medical device company. Just recently, I have a company that I'm working with on the regulatory side, but they wanted some help on the quality side as well. And they were looking to purchase some, let's just say, canned documents about design inputs and outputs and, different processes and so on from one of these outfits that sell, here's the form, buy it, put it in your QMS is essentially ready to go. And in my opinion, John, and you might agree or disagree, but that defeats the entire purpose of having a QMS.
No, I do agree. I mean, yes, folks, if you want to be that C student or maybe even a D student in this case, you can go spend a couple $1,000s on the internet and you can buy this canned package of quality system procedures. If that's what you want to do, go for it. But please tell me when you do that, because I want to know what medical devices your company is developing and manufacturing, because I don't know that I want those used on myself or anyone that I love and care about. But anyway, I tend to agree. I mean, you gotta own this. I mean, sometimes people look at quality system as a burden, as something they have to do. I want you to look at it in a different way. I want you to look at it as something. This is something that you get to do. This describes your business processes, and of course, your business has unique characteristics, unique features, unique attributes, and your quality management system should be customized to reflect that.
It's kind of on the regulatory side. It reminds me there. Believe it or not, this is a true story. There is an outfit on the internet that sells a 510K template for $150. So,
oh wow.
Anyway, let's move on to your second of the 7 habits of highly effective quality professionals, and that is to move away from paper-based approaches. Now, I'll be honest with you, John, there's a little irony here, because as we speak, the notes for our conversation I have written on a piece of paper. So maybe I'm violating one of your 7 habits. But what do you mean by move away from paper-based approaches?
Sure. And Mike, I have a notepad and a pen that I take to every meeting and conversation that I go. So for me, and some of it's generational, I think, but for me, I'm still an avid a manual note taker on paper. So I'm not saying that paper doesn't have a place in what you do. What I'm proposing here is that if your quality management system and your processes and your approach to day-to-day activities largely lives in, and I'm going to use air quotes here as well around the word paper-based approaches, that might be a little bit fragile and it might not scale. Now, I use air quotes around paper-based approaches for the reason because a lot of companies have digitized their approach. So, think of the olden days, Mike, when you and I first started in this industry, the literal paper-based approach involved a lot of cases, file cabinet. You open a drawer in a file cabinet and there's a bunch of folders or maybe binders. And when information is contained in that file cabinet, it is hard for that to be shared, and it's hard to collaborate with others who have stakeholders in that particular thing that you're doing. How do you get that information disseminated to others who are involved in either a product development effort or manufacturing and so on? So that physical file cabinet is a hard thing to maintain and scale, especially with the nature of companies these days. I mean, it is a rare thing for a medical device company to be completely vertically integrated at a single site or single location. And so, information about your products and processes, it needs to be shared across multi-functions, multi-groups, and oftentimes multiple locations. So what a lot of companies have done is they've more or less have replicated the old school physical file cabinet, physical paper, and instead they've created the same sort of structure in like a server folder tree, or maybe they've got a SharePoint site where it's folder upon folder upon folder. But basically what they've done is replicated that file cabinet in digital form, and that doesn't scale very well either, because information that people need to do their jobs is buried somewhere in a folder, and they may or may not know where that is, or they may use the wrong version and that sort of thing. So these approaches are very fragile. There's a lot of business risk that's tied up in these paper-based approaches. So we're at a day and age where companies need to start to shift and transition to purpose-built solutions to manage their quality system, to manage their key documentation and records. And frankly, that's what we've done at Greenlight Guru, is we built a purpose-built solution for the medical device industry to help companies make that shift.
Well, I like that phrase, John, purpose-based solution. And you're right. Obviously, there's a lot of advantages of electronic files and so on, as opposed to a paper-based system. But let me also, compare that to the regulatory side. I see a lot of people today making electronic submissions to the FDA via, PDFs or, that kind of thing. But rarely do they take advantage of all the bells and whistles that come along with the electronic submissions, like, for example, hyperlinks and so on. So the purpose here is not just simply to save a few trees, although that's certainly an admirable goal, but I think to go beyond that. So
for sure.
Let's move on to your third of the 7 effective habits of highly effective quality professionals, and that is always be audit ready. That seems kind of short and simple. What do you mean by always be audit ready?
Sure. Well, let me share a story that it's not a unique story. It's one that I have heard many, many times. And Mike, you probably have heard this as well. And the story goes something like this. Company gets a phone call and it's from FDA, and FDA is giving them notice that they're going to come and do an inspection of their facility, and it's going to happen in 2 weeks. So the person receiving that call at the company, sends out the APB to the organization and says, "Oh, FDA is going to be here in 2 weeks." And now all of the different managers and VPs, now they're going around almost person to person, the FDA is coming, and we need to clean this up, and we need to change this, and we need to make sure this is happening and that's happening. It's like all of a sudden when a company realizes that they're going to have an FDA inspection or an ISO audit, it's like all of a sudden they start to promote that we have to behave differently. And that just drives me crazy. Folks,
it drives me crazy too, John.
I mean, why do you have to have a different behavior because FDA is there? Why do you have to have a different behavior because ISO audit is happening? It should be the same behavior regardless of who is in your facility. You shouldn't have something to hide. You shouldn't have something to share. You shouldn't change. So you should be audit ready all day, every day. Doesn't matter if you know the FDA is coming or not. It shouldn't change your behavior. So that's what I mean by that.
And as a result of what you just described, John, I think most of these audits and inspections are totally artificial because, like you just said, everybody is on their best behavior. So what do you think of this idea, John? This is something that I've proposed before. Why should FDA provide any advance notice whatsoever? Why don't they just simply show up at your door and, hi, we're here from the FDA, show us what you're up to? What do you think of that idea, John?
Well, I'm not opposed to that idea at all because, again, I'm a huge fan of companies being transparent with what they're doing. And theoretically, FDA could do that now. They don't have to give you notice. It is a courtesy when they do. They don't have to. So I think that's where, another important aspect of this particular habit is if you're of the mind that you have nothing to hide, then why should it matter who's there? You're right. A lot of audits, a lot of FDA inspections, they're very sterile. It's almost like they're rehearsed, and it's not a genuine activity. And, that's concerning if we as an industry are behaving that way.
Well, John, it's interesting. Let's be candid here. You said it's almost like being rehearsed. I think it is exactly being rehearsed because it's very typical for companies to rehearse with their employees what to say and how to say it, during an inspection. So to our friends and listeners in the audience who might get a little nervous about the idea of having, somebody just show up at your door unannounced, I would just say this: if you're doing all the things that you should be doing anyway, then you have absolutely nothing to worry about, and you should welcome that. On the other hand, if you have concerns about some of the things that you're doing, maybe now is the time to be a bit proactive and say, gee, maybe we should make sure that all of our ducks in a row, before somebody does come knocking on that door.
Yeah,
so let's move on to. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing before we leave that topic. There is advantages to doing some rehearsal of knowing what to expect during an FDA inspection and an ISO audit. Don't mishear me, but it shouldn't change your behavior. So do be prepared. Know how to navigate these particular activities. Because granted, an FDA inspector showing up, I mean, it is going to create, it is going to be a different day than if the FDA is not there, but it shouldn't be a whole new act, a whole new way of doing business. It should be business as usual for the most part.
Your point is very well taken, John. Thank you for that clarification. And to be fair, this is something they do a lot as well. As we've talked about before, I also work as a expert witness in product liability cases for medical devices. And while I would never in a million years allow any attorney to influence the content of my message, I will always welcome their advice on how to spin it, how to present that information. So there is a difference. Anyway, thank you for that clarification. So let's move on to habit number 4 of 7 habits of highly effective quality professionals, and that is implement risk-based approaches in decision-making. You and I have talked about risk many times. What do you mean by implement risk-based approaches in decision-making?
Yeah. So every day you're going to be faced with decisions that you need to make, whether it be about specific design features of your product, or you received a quality event of some sort, maybe it be a complaint, or you had a nonconformance in manufacturing. All of these things that happen, all these events that happen on a day-to-day basis, they're apply a risk-based logic to this. And what I mean by that is try to understand the scope and the order of magnitude and the potential impact that this issue presents to your organization. And, like in a complaint is a good example to kind of walk through. If you get a complaint from a customer about something about your product, you need to understand how big of a complaint is this? Is this something that's kind of nice to have? Is it something that caused some sort of injury or has the potential to cause some sort of injury? And so it's really being able to apply this risk-based decision-making to those types of events so that, the thing that's kind of a nice to have, the actions that may come out of that risk-based decision, the actions might be drastically different than something that is a potential issue from a health standpoint, from an end user health standpoint. I would hope that if a product has the potential or an issue has the potential to cause some sort of injury or adverse event of some sort, that would be a much higher profile, much higher priority, that you would be very much more diligent in the types of actions that you're taking to address. So, it's really about, I think, Mike, you and I have talked about this emergency room analogy before, and it's kind of a good analogy. I mean, if you think about, you're running an ER and patients, are coming in off the street for anything from, a stub toe to, a heart attack, you're going to treat those patients differently because of the risk that they present. And so you should think about your quality events, the things that are happening on the day-to-day, with a similar type of lens.
Well, you're exactly right, John. And you're referring to something that we talked about recently, your risk-based approach, which I 100% agree with, is similar to what I call my triage approach. And this is something that to me as an engineer makes sense. However, the unfortunate reality, John, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Right now, I'm working with a company who received a 483 because they are not treating all of their complaints equally. They are addressing all of their complaints. They're all investigating them, but they are taking this risk-based approach, this triage approach, and yet the inspector, gave them a 483 because, at least in her view, she thinks all complaints should be treated equally. What is your thinking on that, John?
Well, I'm just going to say I don't agree with that. I mean, it's unfortunate that the company received a 483 observation, because it sounds like a little bit that you've shared about what they're doing. It sounds like they're actually applying a risk-based approach, and they're actually putting good business practices in place to evaluate and address those types of issues. Folks, not all quality events are equal. Not all complaints are equal. Not all CAPAs are equal. And what we do as medical device professionals, we have to apply some sort of logic to figure out what are the most important things that we need to be focused on. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've got a tough challenge ahead of you and trying to manage that particular situation, but it doesn't make any sense that you would handle all things equally. That's just not the way things happen. It's just not the way the world works.
Well, I agree, John. That is not the way the world works. Not all events are equal, and they should not be treated equally. But perhaps in this ultra hypersensitive, politically correct society that we've evolved into, that's contrary to dogma. Everybody is equal. Everybody shows up and gets a trophy. I don't know. Something to think about. Anyway, let's move on to the fifth. So we're in the home stretch now of your 7 habits of highly effective quality professionals. And that is stop reacting to events and instead be proactive. What do you mean by stop reacting and be proactive?
Yeah. So I think this is there's a lot of symptoms that have kind of led to this, but we as an industry have accepted for far too long now that it is okay for us to wait for something to happen. And once we learn that something's happened, then we do something about it. Maybe it's cultural too, because you think about and I don't let me go too far down this rabbit hole, Mike. Pull me out if I get too deep. But if you think about like the healthcare in the United States specifically, it's a very reactive system right now. You wait till something bad happens, and then you go to the doctor, and then for all intents and purposes, a lot of issues they're treated with, quote, a Band-Aid. We didn't get to the root cause, and we reacted. Instead, be proactive. And what I mean that don't wait for something to happen. Go out and try to learn about your products and processes. Always look for opportunities to improve those things. And there will, if you have the right KPIs, the right metrics that you're in place, and you're not going to get it right out of the gate. You need to establish some sort of means to measure your product and process performance. But you try to get as many leading indicators as you possibly can, so that you can understand what's truly going on, and be and track and trend these types of processes, so that you can learn about things before they become big issues, before they actually happen to become adverse events or negative effects. Monitor and evaluate, track and trend, and take action before the issue becomes a big deal.
Well, I think it's excellent advice, John, but it's also sometimes easier said than done. I kind of hinted at the beginning of our conversation today. It's not always easy to convince the bean counters in our companies to go above and beyond. How do we convince the bean counters? And I'm using that phrase bean counter affectionately, but how do we convince them to spend the time and the money to try to solve a problem before it pops up? How do we convince them to build a quality system that is more right-sized, more personalized than what is required? How do we convince them to do, more testing or whatever on that might be required by the regulation or the FDA? Do you, in a succinct way, John, do you have any words of wisdom to share with the audience on how to win that argument?
I have words of wisdom. I guess you can be the judge if it's succinct or not. But the words of wisdom that I apply is, companies need to. I think this notion of cost of poor quality. I don't know that's made it into our lexicon or even into our practices in a significant way as of yet in the industry. But if you think about, complaint is a good example because it is highly visible as far as product performance, ultimate product performance in the marketplace. I mean, if you think about the activities that you have to go through to address a complaint, even just to assess and apply some risk-based logic to it. I mean, there's effort that goes into that. And a lot of times and then you can look at like CAPA process, you can look at non-conformances, you can look at your overall document management efficiency and so on. You can pick any one of these areas. Product development, the cost of being reactive, almost not always, but in many respects, will rear its head in poor quality, and it will be situations where you're going to have to react and respond to events and situations. And if you think about from a bean counter perspective, how many resources do you have dedicated or allocated to simply address these reactive events? Are those departments, are they growing in numbers and people and tools and systems that you're putting in place just to deal with those things? That could be pretty expensive. Whereas, if you can address that ahead of time, maybe you don't need quite the resource allocation to react to situations. So I don't know if that's as succinct as you were hoping for, but I think people should try to evaluate what is the cost of poor quality, what are the metrics and items that could be indicators of whether or not your products and processes are where they need to be.
Well, I think that is good advice, John. Certainly, it would be difficult for me to provide any better advice, but we also have to acknowledge what is the unfortunate reality in our industry, in our business, and that it is in most medical device companies, it's not the regulatory or quality or R&D folks that are ultimately calling the shots. It's the business and the marketing folks. So, that's though, and sometimes people don't want to say that, I read in the mission statements of a lot of companies, we want to develop and bring to the market only the most safe and effective products as we can, yada, yada. Sometimes I wonder, and I'll leave this as a rhetorical comment, John, but sometimes I wonder, does anybody really believe this stuff? Or is just we're lining up to drink the Kool-Aid. Anyway, let's move on to the sixth habit of 7 habits of highly effective quality professionals, and that is break down silos and barriers. That's very simple on the surface, but I have a feeling there's a lot that goes under that. What do you mean by breaking down silos and barriers?
Yeah. So, and it kind of gets back to some of the comments that I shared at the beginning about being compliance minded versus a true quality professional. And the term quality in and of itself carries a lot of baggage, and I suspect in a lot of organizations it has a lot of negative connotations. Unfortunately, I think a lot of companies, they view that quality department or that quality function almost as an extension of a regulatory agency like the FDA. They view the quality department as the department who makes a bunch of rules and establishes, all the things that I have to do. And they're creating a lot of burden. They're creating a lot of obstacles. They're preventing me from getting my job done. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of companies they are structured that way, which hopefully we can.
In a lot of companies, John, they're simply viewed as the police.
They are viewed as the police, and and we all have, on my drive into the office this morning, there was one point on my drive, and I was going the speed limit, and I was following all the traffic laws and all that sort of thing. But I could see a police car, 3 or 4 cars behind me in my rearview mirror, and it's like all of a sudden I behave differently. And it's kind of back to that notion that I mentioned earlier. Why would I have to behave differently if I wasn't doing anything wrong? But it's kind of like we've been conditioned this way, unfortunately. But it's at a time where in a lot of companies, it's I don't know what it is. I guess I kind of equate it to, it's like this. It's like power. Some of the organizations, quality wields a lot of power within the company because they are the police. They make the rules, and sometimes it leaves other areas feeling disenfranchised. And other organizations I've seen where the human resource department wields a lot of power and that sort of thing. And that's not a healthy culture. It's not a healthy environment. I mean, and like I can use Greenlight Guru, for example. I mean, we have our customer success department. We have our marketing department. We have our sales department. We have our development department and operations and so on. And, we focus on cross-functional interactions, because everything that each of us does has a relationship to another area of the business. And so it's very important. We focus a great deal on that culture and making sure that as best as you can, that there are no silos, that there are no barriers, that there are no walls between these organizations, because we're all in this together. We're all trying to achieve that same thing. And to your point about the mission statement, I hope companies truly, if people in those companies truly do believe that they're trying to improve the quality of life, that they're trying to make sure that the products and the processes that are involved in these devices that they're designing, developing, and manufacturing, that they are making a difference for the patients who receive those. And I think if we all look at our world, our role, our business through that lens, that we can try to understand the purpose and the benefits of having this cross functionality.
Well, again, John, I love the sentiments. I love the philosophy. It sounds like we should break out into a harmony of Kumbaya or something, but we won't do that. Let's move on to the 7th habit of highly effective quality professionals. And before I announce it, here's a little sound effect. So that was supposed to be a drum roll. You know, my primitive attempt at levity here. Anyway, the seventh and final habit of highly effective quality professionals, according to John Speer, is shift from compliance-minded to true quality focused. I think this is going to tie up a lot of what you and I have been talking about, not just today, but in the past.
Yeah.
What does that mean, John? Shift from a compliance-minded to a true quality focus.
Yeah, and folks, everything that I've been sharing with you today is really with this notion or this idea. You know, my journey into the medical device industry was, at least initially, was somewhat accidental, and maybe serendipitous, I suppose. But I didn't plan on entering into the medical device industry out of school. The gravity of what I was involved with didn't really hit me until I had been at a medical device company for at least 18 months, maybe a couple of years. And the first moment that it hit me, I was working on designing and developing a new catheter-based introducer product. And I did a lot of work on the testing. I was quote compliance focused, at least in those early activities on the design and development of this particular device. I was making sure that I checked all the boxes, that I had all the biocompatibility, that I addressed the sterilization, that I had done the performance, and so on and so forth. I was very task oriented in my function or my job to get this product to that next step. And the moment that it really hit me was the first clinical use of this particular device. I was in the OR. I was 12 inches away from the anesthesiologist who was using the product, 12 inches away from the patient who was about to receive this device that I had designed and developed and tested and checked all the boxes on all the forms to make sure that it was quote safe and effective. And then I had a moment where internally I was freaking out. And I was internally freaking out because the gravity of that situation suddenly hit me. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is a real patient. This is a real doctor. This is a real procedure. And this is a real device that I had a hand in designing and developing. And, and everything went well. And it probably just took a few seconds, but man, it's like, in some respects, it was like my entire life was passing in front of my eyes. I mean, it was a very intense moment. And from that moment on, I love what I do because I know that working in the medical device industry, that I have an opportunity to help bring new, exciting technologies that are going to make life better for you, for me, for the people that we love and care about. And if we have that true quality focus when we consider what it is that we do, then I think that the medical device industry will always be in the medical device industry, period. Because I believe in the ultimate humanity mission for humanity that we can all play. And if you're just checking boxes on forms, I think you're going to miss that.
Well, I think that personal story of your first experience with the patient in the OR or the cath lab was a wonderful story, John. And it's particularly apropos here because as we just went through the 7 habits of highly effective quality professionals, which is a riff of Stephen Covey's 7 habits of highly effective people. What you're describing, John, is what Dr. Covey calls a paradigm shift. Where you have a based on one particular experience, a true shift, a true change in the vision and the purpose. So thank you for sharing that story. And by the way, a couple of companies that I work with, they will try to do something similar with their employees. I've seen companies, and this is of course not required, but they will invite a patient to come in and talk to their employees. And oftentimes this is done for the manufacturing workers on the floor to tell them, as a result of using their particular medical device, how their life was changed, how their life was improved, in some cases, how their life was even saved. And so you're exactly right. This is, I make jokes about this sometimes, but this is high stakes bingo. So, John, thank you so much for sharing your 7 habits of highly effective quality professionals. Before we wrap this up, if you were to summarize this into sort of one takeaway, one lesson to be learned, one most important point to the audience, what might that be?
Wow, you're putting me on the spot. So, I think now more than ever, there's the things that you're doing. We certainly don't want them to be, evening news material. And if you're making headlines on the evening news or in newspapers, I think those are still a thing. But or on the internet. Usually these days it's not because of good news, and nobody wants to be known for the bad event. Hell, Mike, so you and I both know they're making documentaries about all the things that go wrong in our industry these days. And I guess what I hope companies realize and people listening to this will realize is we have an opportunity to tell our story. And we have the opportunity to be advocates for improving patients' lives. And we have, I think, also a responsibility to be that voice of customer and to make sure that the things that we're doing in the medical device industry are going to yield positive patient experiences. So, I just hope people can change their mindset and, to your point, shift their paradigm to realize that what each and every one of us does in this industry it has an awesome impact. Awesome could be good. It can be bad. It really is your choice.
So I'll let you wrap this up in just one moment, John. I just got to add one last comment. I found it interesting that you just said that your goal is to avoid being on the evening news. My goal is actually to be on the evening news. But here's the difference. I want to be on the evening news in a good way. I want to be on the evening news announcing that we just came out with a wicked cool new medical device that has the potential to, improve people's lives, save lives, and so on and so on. So, is the glass half empty or half full? I want to be on the news, but in a good way, not in, unfortunately, a bad way.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. So, Mike, thanks for being open to a little bit of a role reversal today and diving into this topic. Folks, as always, if I would encourage you to reach out to a guy like Mike Drues with Vascular Sciences. The guy is simply a pro. He cares a great deal about the products and the processes and the devices that you're trying to bring to market. And he is an advocate of your cause, and he knows how to navigate these regulatory waters, which, at times can be treacherous and they can be confusing and that sort of thing. But, think of Mike Drues as the Lewis and Clark to get you through this process. Or maybe the Sacagawea would be a better term. But truly, Mike is the best out there, and he knows how to navigate this process and can be an advocate for what you're doing. So I would encourage you to reach out to him if you have some questions and comments about getting your product to that next step. And then, of course, as always, Greenlight Guru. We've, as I mentioned earlier today, we have a purpose-built EQMS software platform that is specifically and exclusively for the medical device industry. And a lot of these habits that I've shared with you today and we've talked about today, that is built into our entire culture at Greenlight and into our software platform. So if you're interested in figuring out how to adopt some of these habits that we've shared today, I would encourage you to go to www.greenlight.group to learn more.